The humble circular saw is the most important tool in my shop, and it probably is in a lot of yours as well. Unfortunately, I've wasted a lot of money buying circular saws and not considering these very important aspects. So I'm going to share with you 3 things that they don't tell you when you go to buy or upgrade your circular saw so that you can learn from my mistakes and not have to pay the price yourself. Probably the most painful lesson to learn is that size matters when it comes to your blade selection. When you're shopping around for a new saw, you might be more focused on stats like the price or the amperage, but here's why I think people should insist on a 7 1/4 inch model most of the time. When it comes time to changing that blade, which by the way, you should probably do right away when you buy a new saw, those stock blades that they include are generally going to be pretty low quality. Going with a 7 1/4 inch, which is the most popular size, is going to give you the most blade options, including different price tiers, brands, tooth count, or other design features. 6 1/2 inch saws are in a somewhat distant second place when it comes to this. Check this out. Take this Diablo 40 tooth count as an example. Spot the difference? You're not imagining things. The smaller blade is actually more expensive than the larger one. Why, you might be asking? Well, a less popular 6 1/2 inch size is likely going to lead to lower production runs, which means a higher cost per blade, and that additional cost normally gets pushed onto the consumer, i.e. me and you. And this effect is even more magnified on smaller, more specialty blades like the increasingly popular 4 1/2 inch size. Now these differences are going to vary a lot by manufacturer, but the general premise is the same. Blades other than the 7 1/4 inch are probably going to be more expensive, or at the very best, the same price as 7 1/4 inch model. So it's pretty counterintuitive, but that's the reality of things. So to keep it simple, I would just stick with the 7 1/4 inch in most cases. So you might be thinking by now, why is 7 1/4 inch the king? Why is it the most popular size? And I believe a lot of that has to do with cutting depth. A lot of people don't even bother to check this number on the box when they're buying a saw, but I think it's probably one of the most important specs to check. And you can find this number easily on most saws by looking on the online listing or sometimes on the box. In general, that larger blade size is going to give you the option to cut thicker stock or thinner stock, while a smaller blade is going to be more limiting because it doesn't have that higher end capacity. My personal benchmark for a 7 1/4 inch circular saw, ideally it should be able to cut a 3x piece of lumber in a single pass at 0 degrees, meaning a perfectly square blade, and it should be able to cut a 2x piece of lumber in a single pass when the blade is naturally more shallow at 45 degrees. That should be plenty of capacity for most projects. If you are looking to cut stock any thicker than that, unfortunately you probably will have to roll out the table saw. Or maybe even one of these things, just for fun. The problem is once you start noticing this number, you won't be able to unsee it. And you'll discover, just like I did, that a lot of popular saws get so close to clearing that 3x, but they just can't quite get there. Which, by the way, if you don't know, then size 4 is actually 2 1/2 inches. You'll notice in this case, DeWalt got the memo, but my very own Pride and Joy Metabo circular saw, which I love by the way, unfortunately did not. So you can see how I learned this lesson the hard way. Doesn't it just drive you crazy seeing that number so close to 2 1/2? It drives me insane. Anyway, even once you settle on the perfect circular saw for you, you could still ruin your projects if you don't check for this final thing, and that is the squareness of your blade. And if you want to check the accuracy of your own saw, try this. With the battery out or the saw completely unplugged, locate the angle gauge and set it to 0 degrees. Now pull back the blade guard with one hand, and with the other, reference it against your square. Being careful to avoid the part of the blade where the tooth sticks out on the side. That'll throw off your measurements. But hopefully at this point you're registering perfect square where that angle gauge reads 0 degrees. If that's not the case, flip your saw around and locate the small set screw on the underside of the base plate underneath the gauge. Take an Allen wrench and adjust it so that the 0 degree mark is now aligned with your squared blade. Now, depending on the specific saw model that you have, this might not be able to be adjusted or be able to be adjusted enough. And keep in mind that shipping the saw to your store alone can sometimes cause some pretty severe misalignments. The Metabo saw that I showed you is actually my second one. The first one was so badly out of alignment, I had to return it and replace it. And the new one is great, but this is exactly why it's something that I would check out of the box while you're still in the return window. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe for more practical content just like this. So until the next one, remember to enjoy the build. Thanks for watching.